All right, everybody. Well, happy Sunday. So glad that you could be in church today. My name is Jackson. I'm one of the pastors here at Cypress, and whether you're here at the Alton Darby location, whether you're in the room at one of our other campuses, or you're worshiping online, I'm so glad that you could be here as we're going to get into the second week of a new series that we kicked off last weekend. But before we do, I'm going to start this weekend. It's a little bit different than I usually do. All right, and what I want to do is I want to share with you a story that I heard recently. This is a true story if you want to look it up later in your own time this week. But it was in 2014 where there was a British man named Damien Lowe who was hanging outside a city overseas in London, England. Damien was minding his own business, and then a van pulled up next to him in the street, and a group of terrorists got out of the van. They kidnapped Damien at gunpoint. And what they did next is they took Damien to a secure, undisclosed location. And after having conversations with him, they were able to figure out who his family was and where they were. And so what they did is they sent his family a message demanding these huge sums of money, or else they were going to harm Damien. It was in euros, so I don't know exactly how much it was, but just take my word for it. It was a lot of money, so much so that his family sent a message back to the terrorists saying, there's no way that we can come up with this much money this quickly. We have no other options. And so what they decided to do was to show his family how serious they were. They were going to cut off one of his fingers and send it to the family. Now, what's interesting about this is that these terrorists, they were like nicer than the ones we see in the movies, because what they did is they actually let Damien choose which of his 5 fingers he wanted sent to his family. So put yourself in Damien's shoes just for a moment here. You have 5 seconds to determine which finger on either of your hands you're going to live the rest of your life without. Now, did you know, though, that hand surgeons, they actually tell us there is a right answer about this. But what I want to do before I give you that answer is I'm one of your pastors, right? So I love you, I care for you. When I was actually getting prepared for this story, I was making sure I had all my facts straight, and I came across like 3 or 4 other articles where this has happened to other people in the past. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is if it's happened to other people, it could happen to you. So I want you to be prepared. So every campus, I'm going to give you 10 seconds. I want you to turn to the person next to you and tell them which of your fingers you would choose to live without and why. You've got 10 seconds. All of our campuses, ready, go. All right, I heard some great conversations here at the Alton Darby campus. I'm sure this is taking place everywhere. I'm going to bring us back together. Like I said, though, I'm bringing us back. Hand surgeons, they tell us there is a right answer. All right, you want to know what it is? I'm not going to tell you until the end of this teaching. All right? So you got to stay locked in with me. What we're going to be talking about in week 2 of this series, it's the hands of a leader. Okay, last weekend, Pastor Ken kicked it off, and it was all about the heart of a leader. And really the premise of the whole teaching, it was incredible if you missed it to go back and watch it, but it was asking the question, why do we lead? What are our motives? And once your heart is right, the next question you have to ask yourself is, how do I actually do the things that leaders do? How do leaders accomplish great things? What are the hands of a leader? And I want to start this weekend by sharing with you what is probably one of the greatest leadership myths in our world today. And here it is. The myth is that individuals accomplish great things. And in our culture today, we have a tendency to make a false assumption. When you see someone achieving great things, we assume that it's their greatness is what made them great. But the reality is, nothing of significance has ever been accomplished by an individual acting alone. So if you see a parent whose kids are just thriving in life, and they get into the dream school, or they have the perfect job, and such a young age, it looks like they're thriving, I guarantee you that those parents, they had a support system, they had a community. They did not just raise that child all by themselves. If you see an athlete who's accomplishing great feats and winning championships, I guarantee you that that athlete, they had coaches, they had nutritionists, they have an agent, they have managers, mentors, people that have poured into them. If you see a marketplace leader in our world today, I can guarantee you that from a young age, they had mentors and people that were speaking into them, that were encouraging them, that were giving them opportunities at a young age. The reality is, individuals in this life are not the ones that accomplish great things by themselves. So if that's the myth, then the truth, and what we're going to talk about this weekend, is that teams accomplish great things. There was a legendary coach by the name of John Wooden who coached at UCLA, won numerous national championships. And one of his most famous quotes that he's credited with near the end of his career when he reflected back on everything is he said, "I've realized that it actually takes 10 hands to score a basket." Meaning it's not just the person that you see actually putting the ball through the hoop. It's the person that got the rebound. It's the person that set the screen. It's the person that was getting water for the team. It takes 10 hands to score a basket. And the big idea in week 2 of this series, as we ask, what are the hands of a leader? The big idea is this, if you want to write it down, it's that you can't accomplish anything of significance without a team. We weren't meant to. We weren't designed to. It takes a team to truly accomplish great things. Now, what we're doing in this series is we're really looking at the New Testament. We're looking at the life of Jesus, who we really believe is one of the greatest leaders of all time. It's one of the greatest leadership models, meaning whether you've decided what you believe to be true about the Bible or not, the principles that we're going to be talking about that we can learn from the life of Jesus can be taken, applied to our businesses, applied to our homes, our relationships, and we're all going to be better because of it. And what we're going to do this weekend is to look at Jesus' life and look at 3 lessons that we can learn on how Jesus accomplished everything that he did in his short time on earth. And it's 3 lessons that Jesus can teach us on the topic of teamwork. All right, so 3 lessons. We're going to dive straight in. Here's the first one. It's that very few things are as important as the team that you surround yourself with. Very few things in this life are really as important as the team that you surround yourself with. And where we see this is early in Jesus' ministry. It's in the book of Luke, where Jesus is kind of his public reputation is starting to change. And what I mean by that is he's no longer thought to be just like the carpenter's kid, but he's starting to kind of teach these radical teachings. He's healing people. There's crowds that are starting to gather. People are starting to understand maybe he really is the Son of God like he's talking about. And in Luke chapter 6, it was a full day of ministry. And Jesus gets to the end of the day, and the Bible says that he needed to take a little step back, take a break. So he goes up onto this mountain, and in Luke chapter 6, this is what's going on in Jesus' life. It says that one day, soon afterward, Jesus went up on a mountain to pray, and he prayed to God. How long is this? All night long. Jesus went up on this mountain, you all, and he prayed to God all night long. Now here, this is honestly a little bit convicting even as a pastor, because I'll be the first to admit it, and then you can. I've never prayed all night long. I've prayed at night. I don't know if that counts. I've prayed into the night. We're like 7 weeks away from having our first child, so maybe I will pray all night coming up soon. Who knows? But Jesus goes up on this mountain, and this is the only place in the whole New Testament where the Bible records that Jesus literally prayed all night long. So a normal question to ask yourself then is, what could possibly be so important? What could be so pressing, or what could be so urgent in Jesus' life that he prayed all night long? The answer is in the very next verse, when Luke says that at daybreak, he called together all of his disciples, all the people that had been following him, and he chose 12 of them to be his apostles. Jesus was praying all night long to choose the team that he was going to surround himself with. And this is not just true for Jesus, it's true for all of us. But think about this with me for a moment. If there was ever an individual in the history of the world that could have accomplished everything he wanted to by himself, it would have been Jesus. I mean, he was the Son of God. He could have done it without a team, but what Jesus is doing here is he's giving us the leadership model of how we all can achieve great things in this life. And it doesn't matter who you are, what season or stage of life that you're in, nothing as important as the team that you surround yourself with. If you're a single mom, there are very few things in this life as the support system and the community that you're going to choose to surround yourself with. If you're a student and you're wanting to make a positive impact and influence on your high school, there's very few things as important as the friends and the community and the teams that you surround yourself with. Whether you're like leading a startup company, whether you're a CEO of a large organization, the team you surround yourself with is so, so important. And in the New Testament, this is a theme that just continually gets talked about. And the reason for that is because you're not good enough to lead it all by yourself. Whether it's your family or your workplace, I'm not good enough to lead all by myself. And the reason for that is because God has actually given you a unique set of different gifts that you can add value to when you join a team and a community. This is a principle that Paul was trying to teach to the Ephesian church early after Jesus left, and he commissioned Paul to really start these different churches. He was trying to explain to them that it's not all on you. And it's in Ephesians 4 where Paul is writing to them, and he says he makes the whole body fit together perfectly. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. Did you know that you have your own special work that God has called you to do? And allow this to take some of the pressure off of your shoulders when it comes to leading, no matter what area of life it is. God didn't design it for it all to be on you, but for it to be shared with a team. And what I want to do is I just want to use Cypress Church as a case study for all of us this weekend. We could probably use any of our different workplaces, but I want to use Cypress Church as a case study. Cypress has been led by Pastor Ken for 24 years. And one of the things that Pastor Ken shared last week in week 1 of the series is one of the biggest differences he knew going from a smaller church in Wisconsin coming to Cypress is that it was actually going to be now more about the team that was around him, that he was going to support and lead through them. Now, if Pastor Ken came into work tomorrow morning, on Monday morning, and he said, all right, you know what? I've changed my mind. I don't actually want a team. I want to do this all by myself. I don't need a team. I'm going to take it all on my shoulders. Do you know that to lead Cypress Church by yourself, do you know all the things that you would have to be an expert in? I put together a short list. This is honestly just a snapshot. This isn't even all of it. But if he was going to lead all by himself, he'd have to be an incredible vision caster. He'd have to be a theologian. He'd obviously have to be a preacher and communicator, a manager, a team builder, a creative. He'd have to be a writer, constantly coming up with new content, a recruiter. He'd have to be a musician. Y'all, if your campus pastor, if after this teaching he says, you know what, give me the mic, let me lead worship, you'd leave this church. We all have different gifts. Pastor Ken's not designed to be a musician or a counselor or arbitrator, whether it's finances. He has to be an expert in college ministry, audiovisual, real estate. He'd have to be a graphic design expert, know everything about student ministry, food service, kids, marketing, do all of the weddings by himself. He'd have to be an expert in web design, human resources, legal, crisis management, and social media, which changes by the week. Not to mention, he'd have to be 6 places at once on a Sunday morning, and he'd have to be fluent in Spanish. You all, there's no way that he could do it. There's no way that any person could do it. And it's not just true for Cypress, it's true for any organization, family, or anything that we all lead. At the end of the day, God's dreams for you will be determined by the strength of the team that you've built around you. I'm going to say that one more time. God's dreams for you will be determined by the strength of the team that you've built around you. We just finished this series last month called Dream Chasers, and it was all about diving into the dreams and the visions that God has placed on all of our hearts. Make sure you understand, though, that your personal dream is never meant to be chased in a silo all by yourself. God's given you community, God's given you friends, and at the end of the day, there's very few things as important as the team that you surround yourself with. All right, here's the second lesson that we can learn from the life of Jesus. And it's that when surrounding yourself with a good team, prioritize teamwork over talent every single time. So when you actually have to decide who are the people that I am going to invite into my team, you got to prioritize teamwork, how well they work together, over talent every single time. And this is a secret that not a lot of businesses and corporations are following today. And the reason for that, it makes sense. If you have a spot to fill on your team, most people's minds immediately go to who is the most talented, who is the most qualified, who has the best track record. That's the kind of person that I want to fill this with. But when Jesus actually came off that mountain and he decided for the first time, who are the 12 people that I'm going to pick out of all these crowds that are gathering, he didn't actually value their individual talent, but he looked at how well will they actually fit together. And if you go back to that Luke chapter 6 passage, if you keep on reading a little bit further, it actually lists the 12 people that he ended up picking. And it was Simon, who he later named Peter. It was Andrew, Peter's brother. It was James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, Simon, Judas, and then another Judas who later betrayed him. But what you need to know about these people is that they were not anywhere close to the most talented or the brightest or the most eloquent speakers. They were fishermen. They were tax collectors. A lot of these people, they were skeptics. They didn't even know if they really believed all of it for sure yet. They were doubters. But what Jesus was valuing is he was valuing teamwork over talent. In fact, there's something recorded in the book of Acts where it was a story where two of these 12 guys named Peter and John, they ended up delivering this message where thousands of people got saved. But it's so funny to me when you actually look at the public perception of who they were and what they were doing in this situation. So if you can imagine it, like Jesus has his group of 12 that he's been training and developing. Jesus goes back to heaven. Two of them then start this incredible service where thousands of people are saved. And there's people in the crowd that are experiencing this and they're kind of confused. And this is why they're confused. In Acts 4, it says, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, that's not a way you want to be described. But people were so confused. They were blown away by what was happening because they said, these two guys, they're unschooled, ordinary men that work 8 to 5s. They don't really, there's nothing special about them. But then what they actually noticed when they stepped back and looked at it is they were astonished because they took note that these men had actually been with Jesus. You see, it was the fact that they fit together well with the team that made them valuable and allowed them to accomplish great things. It wasn't because they were the smartest or the brightest or anything like that. Now, what's interesting is science is actually getting to a place where I think it's starting to catch up with this principle. It's starting to prove that this principle in the Bible is true. And it was in 2008 where MIT, they did this huge study, and what the study was, the big question that led it was they were trying to find out what kind of teams have the most success. And what they did is they took 699 different individuals, and they gave each one of those individuals an IQ test. So out of everyone that was in this study, they knew exactly how smart everyone was. Then they took all the individuals and they broke them down into 152 different teams, and they grouped some of the smartest people together, some of the people that scored lower together, and then mixed it all around. And they gave them the same group of just challenging puzzles, brainstorming activities, things that they had to work together to accomplish. Well, wouldn't you know that there was almost no correlation between how smart someone was, how talented everyone in the group was, and how they actually performed in this puzzle. But doesn't this almost mess with your minds a little bit? Wouldn't it make the most sense that if you have the most talented people all on the same team, they are the ones that should be able to accomplish something great? But the reality is, you have to value teamwork over talent whenever you're looking into this. And we see this in sports all the time. I love following all different kinds of sports. And what we always see in free agency, right, when athletes are free to decide what team, what city, what place do I want to go to, is there's different superstars that will team up together, but then they realize how selfish they are. It's kind of about them and not about the ultimate goal. And then you'll have a much less talented team where there's no egos involved. They come together as a team, and that's the team that actually ends up winning the championship. I think the principle that we can take away from this is that average people working together as a team will always outperform superstars that struggle with teamwork. It's true in sports, it's true in the Bible, and it's true in all of our lives as well. It's crazy to think that it was nearly 5 years ago now when the coronavirus pandemic completely shut down our world. 5 years, it's gone pretty quick. But if you think back just to kind of what life was like, what you did, I know one of the things that my wife Olivia and I, we did all the time is we would just binge watch different documentaries. And I've shared this before, but man, we love just diving into just different stories and different things. There was one documentary series that came out. It was right around the time that shutdown happened. I don't remember exactly when, but it was a 10-part series that tracked the life of Michael Jordan. It was called The Last Dance. All right, at all of our campuses, if you know what I'm talking about, if you've seen any of it, just raise your hand. Yep, we probably got about half of us here. You can put your hands down. And what's interesting about Michael Jordan, some of you, I'm sure everyone recognizes the name. He's a phenomenal athlete. Believe it or not, he's actually the second greatest basketball player of all time. So very, very, that was supposed to make some of you mad, right? That was meant to slide in there. Because here's the deal. 2 weeks ago, Pastor Charlie stood on this platform, and he gave a strong stance on who was the greatest of all time. But what I love about Cypress is we have different generations represented up here. So millennials, Gen Z, I'm doing this for you all. LeBron James, you all, he is the greatest of all time. There's no other way to think about it, no other way to look at it. But thinking back to the documentary, The Last Dance, tracking Michael's life, there's kind of a shift that goes on. In the first half of the whole series, it was kind of all about Michael. And if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But he was kind of mean to people. It was kind of more about just his personal stats, winning the MVP awards, Rookie of the Year type stuff. And it was all about what he could accomplish as an individual. As it goes on and he starts realizing the importance of having relationships with teammates and how different people can actually play different roles and they can fit together to achieve something great, that was when they actually started winning the championships. And it was one of the quotes that he shared, it was near the end of that, something that he's credited with, where Michael said that it's actually talent that wins games, but teamwork wins championships. And in this life, I mean, none of us play professional basketball, but it's true for all of us. Talent can get you in the room, it can get you the interview, and kind of get your foot in the door, but if you truly want to accomplish something great in this life, it is going to take a team. And so one question to consider this weekend is that you might be the most talented individual on the team, but does the team actually perform best when you're on it? And it takes a lot of self-awareness to really consider that. Maybe that's something you could take home this weekend and think a little bit more about. So again, we've covered 2 of the lessons that we can learn from Jesus on teamwork. Here's the third thing that I want to talk about this weekend. And it's that Jesus prioritized investing in and empowering his team. Jesus prioritized these 2 things, investing in. Investing is simply just spending time with. And Pastor Ken explained last week, and at the end of the day, leadership is just influence. And it's hard to influence someone that you don't see or spend time with on a regular basis. But Jesus didn't just invest in people, spend time with them. He also empowered them to actually make important decisions. What exactly is empowering, though? I want to show you a parallel passage, and what that means is that it's the same story that we just read in Luke, but it's Matthew's perspective of it. So Jesus goes up on the mountain, he prays, he comes down, he picks his 12, and then it says Jesus called his 12 disciples together, and he gave them authority to cast out evil spirits and to heal every kind of disease and illness. So he actually gave them important tasks that they could do. The Greek word for authority here, it literally means the power or the right to make decisions. And one of the coolest miracles in the New Testament, in my opinion, Jesus finds himself in a very fascinating situation. And it was where the crowds would just come out of nowhere to hear him speak. And for hours, he was teaching and healing people. The crowds just got bigger and bigger and bigger. The problem was there was no food for anybody. People got hungry. The Bible says that there was actually 5,000 men there. So when you include the women and the children, it was probably closer to 10,000 people. So if you've ever been to like Huntington Park for a Columbus Clippers game, just imagine that it's like a completely sold out, standing room only. People are starving. It's not dime a dog night. And there's a little boy with just like a few loaves of bread, a few fish, and he gives them to Jesus. That's the situation Jesus finds himself in. Now, Jesus has a couple options here to solve this issue. One option is he could have like grabbed a megaphone and been like, all right, listen up, everybody. I am the Son of God. I am the man. I am the person that the prophets have been writing about for years. Like if you're hungry and you want your food, you're going to have to come to me. All right, let's form a big line, one by one. Come to me, get your food. I will give you what you need. Jesus easily could have fallen into this line of thinking. And I'm sure we've all experienced this before. I can't be the only one. And it's if you want things done right, you have to do it what? Yourself. I mean, you can't trust someone else to do an important task in this life. If you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. But this is not at all the way that Jesus handles the situation. In fact, the way that Matthew explains what happens next is he says Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up towards heaven, he blessed them, and then breaking the loaves into pieces, he gave his bread to the disciples, who then distributed it to the people. You see, Jesus was equipping and empowering his team. The miracle actually happened in the hands of the disciples. And there's one more quote that I want to share with you from one of our former presidents, Harry Truman. It is amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. Isn't that true? It's amazing what you can really accomplish in this life if you don't care who gets the credit. And at the end of the day, I think for a lot of us, you can either have all of the credit or you can accomplish something great. And the reason for that is going back to the big idea we talked about. You can't accomplish anything of significance without a team. I know I can't do it. Jesus chose not to do it. This is the leadership model that Jesus has given us. Now, one of the cool things that we're doing in this series that we started last week is we're getting a snapshot of different conversations that Pastor Ken has had with different leaders in our church. And he shared last week, and it's so true, man, he could have picked from so many different people doing incredible things at all of our campuses. And what we're going to get to hear a little bit of this weekend is a conversation that Pastor Ken had with Justin and Stephanie. Now, Justin and Stephanie's leadership journey, it probably started like 20 years ago or so, when Stephanie took a marketing job with a local company right out of college called 2 Men in a Truck. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it around town before. It's a moving and junk removal service. And Stephanie has just worked different jobs, moved up gotten different leadership opportunities. Justin got to join the team sometime along the journey. And then it was a few years ago, they actually had the opportunity to buy the Columbus franchise. And when we talk about this topic of teamwork, Justin and Stephanie, they know all about the power of the team that you surround yourself with. They lead a team of, it's nearly 135 employees. They have about 50 trucks in Columbus, and they've grown the Columbus franchise to the second largest in the brand across the whole country. And so just to hear a little bit about some of the things that they've learned on their leadership journey, let's check this out together.
All right, Justin and Stephanie, thank you so much for coming in. What has surprised you about leadership as you've assumed the role that you're serving as the primary leaders and servant leaders of the entire organization?
Our brand is really moving people forward. So starting off as an intern and moving my way up, I think that once you get yourself and you're moving your way up, that you don't really realize you're so used to being in a role where you're responsible either for yourself and then maybe for a small team. And now I'm responsible for 150 people and their families. And that holds a lot of, I think, weight and liabilities that you kind of are recognizing, like, I really have to be a good steward of what I'm in charge of.
Really the first day that we were in that seat by ourselves, kind of realized we're not qualified for this, we're not equipped. And at that moment, I think we realized that none of this really is ours. And we realized that we're just kind of stewards in this position. And that's when we really began to, I think, even take more faith in our relationship with God and just say, this is yours. You have to help us get through this because there's a lot of responsibility and weight, and we're not necessarily equipped for that. We need you to help us and guide us through this. So
I've always said, if you know you're completely over your head, that's not a bad thing because you're reaching for Jesus with every
Right.
stroke you take.
Yep.
But it's when you start thinking, you know what, I think I've got this, that sometimes when it's easy to kind of drift off track there.
absolutely.
I'll be honest, for me, there's times I struggle with drifting, and I try not to, but you just get, whether you're working on something and you focus, it's like, am I still going forward? Am I still making progress? How does that servant mentality impact how you address to stay on it, because they have to be the best they can be, because you're there to serve not just the Lord, but to serve people and to help move people forward?
Just being very clear in our communication about what we're trying to accomplish or what we expect. You just got to figure out, what do I need to do? What does this situation require of me in this moment to set them up for the best success?
Yeah, I agree. I think that sometimes we have to give them autonomy to do their own thing, and then also recognize when they're out of alignment and say, okay, this is not where we have defined where we were.
I hope that our organization would say they were great owners. I would hope that they'd say they were understanding, they were generous with their time, and they gave us opportunities that we weren't going to have in another spot.
And just on the little that I know that's already true. And that's because you guys truly are Christ-like servant leaders. Thank you so much for sharing just a little bit of your journey with us.
Thank you.
Hey, can we thank Justin and Stephanie just for sharing a little bit of their journey? I love the opportunity that we have this whole month just to learn from so many different leaders that are excelling in different areas, being a part of our church. So you guys remember at the beginning of the teaching, I had you pick a finger. What finger did you pick? Let's do a quick vote across all of our campuses. For those of you that chose your pointer finger, raise your hand. Any pointer fingers out there? All right, just a handful here at Alton Darby. What about middle finger? Anyone choose the middle finger? All right, we know what you guys need to work on. All right, get rid of the finger. All right, what about ring finger? How many chose ring finger? Okay, a few. And then this has been the most popular all weekend. How many of y'all chose the pinky finger? Yep, everyone chooses the pinky finger. All right, you want to know what hand surgeons tell us is absolutely the right answer. But before I tell you, what finger, think about this with me, what finger do we associate leadership with? Which of our fingers do we associate leadership with? You listen to me. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you what to do. You need to start working harder, right? It's the pointer finger. All right, hand surgeons tell us that the best finger to pick, if you had to pick, if you're in Damien's situation, for those of you that chose the pinky, you would never want to lose your pinky. All right, in fact, your pinky, it controls nearly 50% of your grip strength. All right, the ring finger and the middle finger, those are actually connected by the same tendon. They control like 35% of your grip strength, so you wouldn't want to lose either of those. Hand surgeons tell us the absolute right answer, if you had to lose one, it's your pointer finger. And the reason for that is they say then your middle finger can pretty much do everything that your pointer finger can do. The one finger that they say you absolutely would never want to lose, it's your thumb. In fact, some hand surgeons say if you would lose your thumb, they would actually break one of your other fingers to try to make a new thumb for you. And you all are learning way more than you hoped to this morning. So then think about this with me for a minute. Which of our fingers is actually the leader? It's not the pointer finger, it's the thumb. Because the thumb is the one finger on your hand that works with every other one of your fingers so that they can actually function as a team and accomplish more together than they ever could by themselves. So it's not your pointer finger, it's your thumb. And what some of you need to do this weekend is you need to go home and you need to chop off your pointer finger. That was a joke, and I don't think I need to slide this in, but just disclaimer, do not chop off your pointer finger. Want to make sure we don't get in any trouble there. But what I do want you to consider at some point this week, whether it's later today, whether it's in your small group, family dinner time sometime this week, is I want to challenge you by asking this question about your life. And it's simply reflecting on, do you have the right team around you? Whether it's your home, whether it's your workplace, whether it's the t-ball team that you coach, do you have the right team around you? I shared this earlier in the teaching, but my wife Olivia and I, it's crazy to think, but we are under 7 weeks now from welcoming our first child into the world. And thank you guys so much. Thank you. And there's even been so many people from other campuses that have reached out just to say they're praying and so excited. We so appreciate every bit of that we get. But a conversation we had 2 weeks ago, before I even knew that this was what we were going to be talking about, is we were just reflecting on just different people and families, and the opportunity to raise a child is incredible, but I can't imagine doing it without a team. I can't imagine not being a part of a church where there's a support system built into it, being a part of a small group. And it's not just true for parenting, it's true for whatever we do in this life. God's dreams for you will be determined by the strength of the team that you've built around you. He has incredible plans for each and every one of us, but they're not to be accomplished by ourselves. It's a team. It's the hands of a leader. It's how Jesus led, and it's how he calls all of us to lead as well. At every one of our campuses, would you stand up with me? You can just stand right where you are. I would love to pray for you, and then we will end with some worship today. Dear Heavenly Father, God, we thank you so much for this series. We thank you for the opportunity just to study the life of Jesus and get these principles that are so applicable to whatever we do. And God, I pray right now for the person who is maybe questioning whether they have the right people around them, whether they have people around them at all. I pray, God, that you would send those right people. Would you give us an ability to seek out the right mentors, the right people that we can influence and pour into? And as we walk through this life, God, I pray that you would give us an uncanny ability to do it together. We love you. We praise you. We pray this all in the name of Jesus. And everybody said, amen.